We're talking today, Mike, about sort of issues surrounding anxiety and how not to be swamped by the mind, which I think was a great phrase that you used earlier. I mean, how easy is it to get into a state of mind, I suppose, where you're not overwhelmed by thoughts if you have a natural propensity to that?
Good question. So mindfulness is a practice, it's a kind of training. And, I find it fascinating that we're really good now in our culture at stepping in after the fact. There's help when you've had a breakdown, there's help when things have gotten bad, you've had panic attacks and things like that. But there's little idea that you can do anything beforehand. Like you can, in the same way you train your body to be strong, just to have a strong body, we can train the mind because it's useful to have a strong, resilient mind. That's just going to serve you well in your life. So mindfulness is a practice. And what you're kind of practicing is a completely different relationship to your thoughts. So all the people I work with, generally they have either, not always, but anxiety, depression and things like that. I usually ask everybody, regardless of what they're experiencing, would you say that you think too much? Nobody has ever said no. Nobody. So that's the problem in itself, is thinking too much. We think about everything too much. And then that gets us into trouble. That takes over, the speed builds up. And, we get anxious and worried and fearful about things that are not even taking place. So you kind of suffer twice then, because you'll suffer when it happens, but you're suffering now before it happens. So you're suffering twice. So with the practices, you can learn how to kind of basically self-calm the mind down. Regulate yourself. You do it yourself. And you can try the practice we recorded earlier, and you begin to realize that your mind doesn't have to be full of thoughts all the time. You can kind of quieten that down, and actually when it stills and you can rest in that still mind, actually that's a very homely, nourishing, still place to rest. It's very clear, it's very alive, it's very focused, and it feels much, much better than being just dragged around by your head.
And it's really interesting what you say, the number of people you talk to say that they do think too much. There is something quite comforting about knowing that a lot of people are in the same boat.
Oh, yeah, there is. But there's also something quite worrying at the same time. And that becomes the new normal. We all think we're all depressed, we're all doing this. Oh, yeah, it's normal. Well, it kind of shouldn't be normal, really. I think the ability to self-regulate and look after oneself, that should be normal. But we don't know those practices and skills, and slowly we're rediscovering that. But I would say, as a basic mental health skill, the ability to know that you can calm your own mind down when you need to is number one.
He uses a brilliant phrase in this practice that we recorded today, which of course we'll put online as usual after the show, and you can subscribe to the podcast as well. He used a phrase, catch the mind in action, which I think is a great one, like you said, for just, it's awareness at the end of the day, isn't it? But it genuinely makes you just aware of what you're thinking.
Yeah, and it's that's the way I teach you, with prompts and questions, and just that kind of, that question, what's your mind doing right now? And you take a look. You don't read the answer in a book. You look at your own mind. And often that will strangely kind of scare the mind off. When you think, oh, I'm going to catch the mind in action now, often you'll think, well, okay, it's quiet. I'm not thinking about anything right now. So there's something about kind of turning the spotlight onto your mind and having a direct look that has this kind of effect of creating a gap or a stillness. Mm-hmm. And generally, we're just kind of subsumed by it, merged with it, there's no freedom from it. Which doesn't feel great.
And what's really interesting, and I think there's a lot more research about the mind-body link. So if you think something, it can produce physical symptoms. So I think sometimes, and I think we've talked about it before, is if you imagine, I don't know, eating a lemon or something, it's that sort of process and understanding that the physical consequences of overthinking and of catastrophizing, as you've mentioned.
That's what we do. We catastrophize, and then you feel catastrophic. That's the instant effect of that. Which is crazy, because there'll be times in our lives when that will happen for real. And, so why are we making it happen now when everything is more or less okay? So sometimes I talk about these hot spots in the body. So like your belly, for instance, and your chest is a very good barometer for your experience. You know, if the belly's tense, is it relaxed? Are you breathing high up in the chest? Does your chest feel tight or tense? You know, the body is just this feedback loop, and it's telling you all the time, it's giving you information. But when we're not aware of the body, we're not aware of the information. You know, one teacher I like, who was around in the 20s, Gurdjieff, he used to say, whatever you're doing, hold back about 60% of your attention and keep it on yourself, on your body, on your emotional state, on your mood. So you're kind of holding back enough attention to constantly monitor yourself. And when you start doing that, you realize, yes, my stomach is always tight when I do this. My breath is always high up and shallow when I do this. To recognize that is to begin to change it. So that's why I say mindfulness isn't all about calming down and being still. It's about recognizing awareness. And that's always uncomfortable. You know, oh no, I'm always tense and tight. Well, that's good, because now we can change it.
It makes me think of something I was saying to you the other day, Beth, is sometimes if I'm trying to practice and if I notice my thoughts going off, and like, you know, if I'm listening to one of your podcasts and you'll say, you know, have you drifted off and what is your mind doing right now? Sometimes if I do get back into my body, I feel a bit like I'm on a roller coaster and I have a moment of sort of almost queasiness, like you're sort of bringing yourself back in. Is that normal?
Yes, I would say broadly speaking, it's normal. I mean, people have all kinds of, you know, experiences and feelings and things like that, and usually they all settle down. You know, I've had people disappear on chairs. I've had people feel like they turned to stone. I've had people feel like they floated away. People felt like they were kind of getting dizzy or spinning. I mean, that tends to just settle down the more you practice. And the more you practice, what you tend to sit down with is a still, calm mind. Which is a kind of bliss in itself that you get now. Mm-hmm. It's instant.
Sounds good, doesn't it?
It does sound like a good
thing. It
really does.
So as we've mentioned, Mike has recorded this week's podcast, which will shortly be available to download. And once again, Mike, is there anywhere particular that you need to listen to this? Is this one of the ones that you definitely need not to be driving, for example?
Yeah. Again, no, you know, heavy vehicles and things like that. To take some time out. That's a big part of the practice itself, is take some time out for you, nurture and support you. And this practice will help you calm your own mind down, which helps you, but it also helps everyone around you, because you're not being constantly pulled into it. You're less stressed out, you're less panicked, which helps everybody.